Okay, I think we're going to get started now. I'm just going to, so I want to say good afternoon to everybody here, and thank you for joining this timely webinar, Israel at a Crossroads, Where Do We Go From Here? I just want to mention up front that sadly, one of our panelists, Hanan, is not able to be with us today because she is sick and very unfortunate, but she actually sent some remarks in which I will read from her, sharing her perspective. So my name is Kalela Lancaster. I'm the representative of National Council of Jewish Women in Israel. I lead NCJW's field building work on the ground here, aiming to strengthen Israeli organizations that are working for gender equity and advance their collective impact. Through this work, I have the privilege to work with incredible Israeli feminist leaders like our three guests today, or our two guests that are here in person, and our third guest who has sent remarks, Professor Ruth Halperin-Kaddari, Hanan, Alsaneh, and Tal Hochman. Feminist leaders who work tirelessly for equity, justice, and peace. It is humbling to work with partners like these, and it's my pleasure to host them in this important discussion today. I'll introduce each of them more fully when I turn to them to share their initial comments. But for now, I will say to Ruth and Tal, thank you so much for being with us today. And in her absence, to Hanan, who put thought into what she wanted to, the words that she wanted to share with you. So we're gathering for this conversation at a critical moment. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. This past weekend saw the largest protest in Israel since October the 7th, with an estimated 2.5 million Israelis taking to the streets to demand a hostage deal and an end to this awful war. Despite this, in the last day, the government has announced that 60,000 reservists will be called up in the coming days to occupy Gaza City, to invade Gaza City. And the crisis in Gaza has reached really excruciating levels. The hostage crisis is an unbearable agony for all Israelis. And Israeli society is really reeling under layer upon layer of unresolved trauma. So in this webinar, we will ask, what is the impact of this war on women? What chance is there to reverse the trajectory that we seem to be on? And how can women's leadership help to steer us away from that and towards some hope for the future? This webinar happening right now is also an opportunity to relate to another critical recent development. Last Thursday, the United Nations released its annual report on conflict-related sexual violence and formally placed Hamas on its blacklist, the list of countries and groups that are credibly suspected of committing patterns of sexual violence in armed conflict. This action follows nearly 2 years of relentless advocacy by National Council of Jewish Women and other partners, and the recent Dinah Project report, which documented these crimes in detail. NCJW supported the Dinah Project's research with an early grant from our emergency appeal after October the 7th, ensuring that survivors' stories could be recorded, honored, and believed. So we will begin our discussion here with an effort to shed some light on the context and the implications of Hamas's inclusion in this list. And so in this context, I'm really delighted that we have with us today Professor Ruth Halperin-Kaddari, who is really the best person I could think of to help us with this task. Professor Halperin-Kaddari is an expert on family law and international women's rights, and is the founding academic director of the Hochman Center for the Advancement of the Status of Women at Bar-Ilan University in the Faculty of Law. She completed 3 terms on the UN Committee on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, also known as CEDAW. She is a recipient of numerous research grants and international awards, including the US State Department Women of Courage Award. And in 2018, she was named one of Apolitical's 100 most influential people in gender policy around the world. Professor Halperin-Kaddari is a founding member of the Dinah Project, which was founded immediately following the events of October the 7th to combat the denial of and provide justice for the victims of the sexual violence perpetrated on that day. Within the framework of the project, Professor Halperin-Kaddari is one of the co-authors of the book, A Quest for Justice, October the 7th and Beyond, the most comprehensive legal analysis to date of the sexual and gender-based crimes committed during the Hamas-led attacks. So welcome, Ruth, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Kalayla.
And I'd like to just start by asking you to just share with us your story in relation to this development that's happened of Hamas's inclusion in the blacklist. I know that you worked tirelessly for this result. So could you just explain a little bit what you did, how the Dinah Project came into existence, and what role it has played in influencing the UN?
Yeah. So, like you said, this achievement of the inclusion of Hamas in the annex of the Secretary General's report as an organization that actually uses sexual violence as a tool of war, as a weapon of war, is a culmination of almost 2 years, which started right after October 7 on October 8. The first call that I made was to my former colleague from the CEDAW committee, whom I realized was placed at the exact position which is the most important and most, how should I say, useful for us in the endeavor to uncover and to have the world recognize what was actually done on October 7. I should say that at that point, there were like only, rumors spreading over the net, but not just me, many of us who are familiar with sexual violence against women, and I myself just recalled all the horror stories that I used to hear on my years on the committee from women from other conflict areas who were subjected to rape in times of war. And it was clear to me that Hamas had so many hours uninterrupted, and just like ISIS and just like Boko Haram, that was part of the massacre of that horrific day of October 7. So I called Pramila Patten, the special representative of the Secretary General on sexual violence in conflict, and looked for instructions on what we should do, what can we do in this aim of having the world recognize and condemn Hamas for these crimes against humanity. And that's where the journey started. And even at that early point, she was very, very clear in us needing to know the facts, needing to know, to have at our disposal the evidence, the testimonies, and that took a very, very long time. A major part of it was to have Pramila Patten as the representative of the Secretary General come to Israel and conduct her own fact-finding mission, because otherwise the Secretary General could not have included these findings in these facts in his annual report of last year. And if it hadn't been included in the annual report, then historically and politically, it would actually send the message that it didn't happen. There would not be any formal record recognizing what happened and saying, yes, it did happen. And that was the most important goal in the first half year after October 7. And the Dinah Project played a very, very important role in it. It formed, organically from the ground. Tal here was also part of the forming group at the beginning. And now it consists of Sharon Zagaki-Pinchas, who was formerly had been the chief military prosecutor, and she's the director of the Dinah Project, and Nava Ben-Or, who had been a district court judge and formerly the deputy prosecutor general of Israel, and Nurit Jacob-Zinon and Ita Prince-Gibson. We all formed together, fighting the same fight for recognition and for fighting the denialism, refuting the denialism. and convincing the government to allow Pramila, to allow the UN actually to come into Israel and collect the evidence, collect the testimonies from the ground. And the book that we published just last month, in which we actually called for the blacklisting of Hamas, was another step forward, continuation of the work of Pramila's report and also other reports, by meticulously putting together all existing materials, all testimonies, all pieces of evidence, all pieces of the puzzle, and analyzing them from a legal perspective according to their evidentiary value, so that we could point out to how they all come together to show the systematic nature of the use of sexual violence on October 7 and against the hostages in captivity, and to show that there could be no other explanation for that, but that it had been planned and premeditated, and also to call for prosecution, even though it is impossible to identify specific perpetrator or to put the connection between a specific perpetrator and a specific victim, because the major challenge was and still is that there are no speaking survivors. Most had been murdered, and those that survived are not willing, unable, too traumatized to speak, and at present, and there's no way of knowing whether they will ever speak. And yet there must be a way legally to call them responsible and to have accountability for this horrific crime in conflict. And that applies to all conflict areas, not just to October 7. So we feel it's very, very important to send this as a universal message too.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say as well, you know, while you were talking, I was thinking about, I mean, we've been connected through this whole process. And I remember very, very early on, after, you know, probably in November of 2023 or something like that, meeting with you and also Tal and others who were involved in trying to collect evidence. And it was really, you know, so harrowing, such harrowing work. Obviously, you know, of course, you're a professor and applying your great legal knowledge to this, but also it's such harrowing work. And I just want to say how grateful I feel, and I'm sure we all feel, for that work that you and others have done in such a hands-on way. So, as you said, the significance of Hamas's inclusion in this list is not necessarily in terms of the ability for direct prosecution of individuals, but could you just explain a little bit more what the implications actually are for Hamas's inclusion in this list in a legal context?
Yeah. So the implications are mostly political and declaratory, more than actually legal. Now, it's really important to realize that this inclusion in the annex is at the complete discretion of the Secretary General. He does not need the approval, or it doesn't have to be a decision of the Security Council. And we are placed in an unfathomable situation where Hamas is not recognized by the UN as a terrorist organization. Because to be enlisted, to be designated as a terrorist organization, that has to be a decision of the Security Council, and that will never pass because Russia will always put a veto on this decision. But when it is possible to maneuver other political steps, such as convincing the Secretary General to add Hamas in the same line as Boko Haram and as Daesh and as the rapid forces in the Congo, in the DRC, etc., then it has a tremendous political effect on those countries that are still hesitant in how to relate to Hamas, how to relate to its allies, such as Qatar, such as Turkey, even some forces in Egypt. And there are other means that can be utilized besides the designation as a terrorist organization to sanction individuals, to sanction the group as a whole. And of course, on the historical level, this is the most important recognition that Hamas, contrary to what its supporters who immediately on October 7th started celebrating, and we saw it even in elite universities in the US, celebratory of the resistance fighters and the freedom fighters and holding them. And this actually rips the mask off their pretense to be resistance fighters and shows them for what they are, rapists, and using the most evil and the cruelest means possible in their dehumanization and in their genocidal intents against Israel. So there are several levels of why this is so crucial and so important.
Thank you. You've certainly laid it out very strongly for us, and I do feel I should also say or ask you to comment on the fact that the report also issues a warning that Israel might be included in this list next year. Is there any light that you can shed on this?
So this was actually expected, sadly, because when we talk about sexual violence in conflict, it is a very broad, encompassing terminology. And it encompasses not just rape, but other means of using sexual humiliation against the enemy. And sadly, there had been reports of very improper behavior that guards or IDF soldiers in detention centers had been using against Palestinian detainees, men, not women. And what Israel should have done and still should do is not just investigate itself. Well, first of all, investigate itself to show that there is accountability, that unlike Hamas, where obviously there are no...
That has happened, right? Course, that has happened.
What?
That has actually happened. There
probably had been. We know that in Sde Teiman, there was not just investigation, there is actually an indictment, prosecution. But once Israel, as a democratic state where judicial proceedings, where legal proceedings are properly held, when it does investigate its own people and calls them accountable, that shows the difference, and that shows that Israel does not employ this as a weapon of war, that it is not a state policy. It is not a policy by its leadership. If we investigate and hold accountable those who go astray, that proves that this is not a policy, and that contradicts the definition of using sexual violence as a tool of war. So Israel must do that. And it really, I mean, we at the Dinah Project, we issued a press release on that, where we expressed hope and confidence that Israeli authorities will indeed do what it needs to do, and also in cooperation and in collaboration with the UN mechanism, with the mandate of the Special Representative of Sexual Violence in Conflict, again, to refute this allegation that Israel is also responsible for using sexual violence as a tool of war. If we don't do that, it would really have, I don't want to use too harsh words, devastating effects, but it would help all those who try all the time to equate the two sides and to put them on par and to argue that for symmetry. There is no symmetry. The 7 October attack was against civilian population, unarmed and unprovoked. And those hopefully rare cases where improper behavior might amount to sexual humiliation is against detainees who are suspected to be terrorists. And of course, there is no justification for that either, but the two cannot be compared.
Well, thank you. Also, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, and of course for your incredible work. I will come back to you a bit later. But I'm very sad that Hanan is not able to be with us because she's a very unique person with an incredible story. And I was going to turn to her next to provide a very different kind of perspective on things. And so I'm going to tell you a word about who she is, and then I'm going to read out to you what she sent to me that she wanted to share. Hanan is the co-executive director of Itach-Ma'aki, Women Lawyers for Social Justice. She's a human rights lawyer, a feminist, and a social activist from Beersheba in Israel. She has over 20 years of experience advocating for women's rights and has dedicated her career to empowering Bedouin women and promoting gender equity in traditional Bedouin society. In 2005, she became the first Bedouin woman to represent her community at the UN's, at the CEDAW, the same committee that Ruth referred to. And in 2021, she became the first Bedouin woman to lead a political party, advocating for marginalized communities. So Hanan's work really focuses on advancing women's leadership, peace building, and political participation, particularly through the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which mandates women's inclusion in peacemaking and negotiation. And I think that Ruth knows a bit about that as well. She's also involved in that. But I just want to read out a little bit, because it's so powerful in her own voice. I just want to read out a little bit of what Hanan wanted to say today. And so I apologize that it's in my voice and not in her voice, and that you're not seeing her. Hanan says, "It matters deeply to me that my voice is heard here today, because I truly believe that only by uniting women leaders from all of our communities can we change reality and build a shared home. A home built on justice, equality, partnership, and mutual respect. And believe me, it is possible. I know, because all my life I was told it's impossible. I was born into a conservative Bedouin family, one of 11 children, in a family where girls were expected to leave school at 14, wear the hijab, and prepare for marriage. Our community makes up 30% of the Negev's population, yet lives on just 5% of the land. Decades of neglect and discrimination that women always paid for the most. But none of that stopped me. I broke barriers, I raised my voice, I built initiatives for women. After October the 7th, I co-founded the Jewish Arab Emergency Relief Center in the Negev. Everyone told me it would fail. You'll never get Jews and Arabs to work together, not now. But within days, hundreds of volunteers stood side by side, proving that even in the darkest times, partnership is powerful." And Hanan says that she wants to thank NCJW for standing with her in that project, because we also supported that project with an early grant after October the 7th. Hanan continues, "What feels impossible today can become possible tomorrow." So I wanted to ask Hanan to speak a little bit about applying a gender lens to understand the impact of the war on women. So this is how Hanan related to that. "When we listen to the voices of women, Jewish and Arab women in the South, women in Gaza, and women in the West Bank, we hear a painful truth. This war has hit women the hardest. They are carrying the heavy burden of care. They are facing more gender-based violence, and they are living with deep economic insecurity. But here's the other truth. In the middle of all this suffering, women have been leading. They've been the ones organizing humanitarian aid, building safe spaces for families, and creating dialogue across divides. They are the ones holding entire communities together when everything is falling apart. And when women lead, they change what we even mean by security. Security isn't just about weapons or ceasefires. It's about dignity. It's about health. It's about food on the table, education for children, and protection from violence. That's the kind of security women are fighting for, and it's the kind of security that lasts. So again, I think you can just tell by her words what a shame it is to be missing her presence on this call, but she's very ill, and so it is what it is. But I'm so grateful that she, even though she was ill, she wanted to put some words together and send it over to be read out. And so at this time, I would actually like to turn to Tal Hochman. And do we have Tal on the spotlight?
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. Tal Hochman is the executive director of Israel Women's Network, Israel's oldest women's rights organization, founded in 1984 to promote women's equality and create the social, physical, and economic and judicial conditions for their prosperity. Today, the Israel Women's Network is the leading advocacy organization dedicated to advancing women's rights in all areas, working closely with many grassroots organizations to uplift diverse issues impacting women of all backgrounds and communities, and to ensure that they reach decision-making tables. Tal is also the co-chair of the newly established Policy Forum for Gender Equity, an initiative born of the collaborative planning process that NCJW led in Israel through our field building program, Connecting for Impact. This new forum seeks to support the feminist field to work in a synchronized, proactive, and strategic way for more effective influence in the public, legal, and political spheres. So I want to ask you, Tal, thank you for joining us today. And I want to say that when October the 7th happened to us, we were already in a very poor situation in terms of women's influence at centers of decision-making. And we were in the midst of a crisis with vast gender implications, the judicial overhaul, people will remember, and the democracy crisis. And of course, that was the context within which this war happened, and the context to the situation we're in now, where there's so few women at decision-making tables. So can you unpick this a little bit for us? Why are we in this situation that we're in today with so few women in positions of influence?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind introduction. So as you said, what happened on October 7 and the war that followed after didn't happen in a void. Ever since this government was formed, which was the January of 2023, we saw a huge decrease of the number of women that are taking part of governance, both the political side, but also the experts that are part of governance themselves. And we saw that there were only 6 women that were chosen to be ministers, and men who were chosen to be ministers, and also the women that were chosen didn't choose CEOs that were women. And we have 31
CEOs of the ministries,
yes.
The professional level. Okay.
Yes. This is called a loyalty position here in Israel. And we saw that all the ministers decided to choose men. Absolutely. No woman was in that position. And the women that were chosen in the government before were just let go at the beginning of the term. So we send an appeal to the High Supreme Court of Justice with our partners, other organizations, Forum Dvora and Naamat, claiming that this is obviously illegal because there should be representation for women in positions in governance. in the government.
There's a legal framework in Israel that requires sort of affirmative action in relation to.
Yes. I would call just representation. This is actually the words that are used in the law. It doesn't say equal, but it says representation, and we are claiming that a representation is based on the fact that we are 50% of the population, and so there should be 50% in every kind of position in the government. So that was a long proceeding that took 2 years, and in last February we received a very dramatic verdict that said that we are right and the government is breaking the law, and they should appoint women to these positions. The incredible thing was that it wasn't only for these 31 positions that are, the top of the pyramid in the government. It's also all the loyalty positions that are out there in the government. We're talking about hundreds of positions, mostly positions that are around the most important conversations, the most important rooms, that all the important things are being discussed and decided about. And obviously most of these positions as well are men are in these positions. So that was part of the conversation, and how when October 7 happened, we were already lacking representation dramatically. And lacking representation means a couple of things. First of all, we see how when there are no women around the table, our perspective and our needs, our unique needs, are not taken into consideration. I can give you a couple of examples. One of the things that happened at the beginning of the war, but also in the last operation, the Rising Lion operation, that the government just abruptly decided.
Just to say, because maybe not everybody, you're talking about the Iranian in relation to Iran.
Oh, it didn't stick the name.
I don't know if the name took root so much outside of Israel.
Also in Hebrew, it doesn't sound that well, but never mind. So the government decided to abruptly stop the education facilities and centers, and pretty much told young parents, take care of your children tomorrow. Even though you have to go to work, you also have to take care of your children, and we don't have any solution for you. So for me, it's obvious that no woman was around that table to say, you can't just call and tell the entire state, the entire country, that at midnight to tell everyone that tomorrow everything will be closed. You just can't do that. That is the first thing. And the second aspect is that when there are no women around the table and there are only men, these men can be different and they can have different perspectives and different expertise, but mostly it's the same tone or the same idea, or there are no new ideas around the table. And I see a very strong connection between the fact that nobody's talking about the day after the war, nobody's talking about an agreement, nobody's talking about rehabilitation and recovery in the government, I mean, to the fact that there are no women around that table.
And also, what about negotiation teams?
Exactly. There are no women at all around in the negotiation team. There are only one woman in the security cabinet and only 2 women in the socioeconomic cabinet out of 14. Both of the cabinets are 14 members. At the beginning of the war, there was also like a closed small cabinet of war with 4 men who looked identical with the same Uniqlo coat, a black coat, and it just, that photo itself just is so evident to the fact that we don't have our voice being heard in these spaces. We have decided to establish a Women's Rights Center, partly because of that, after October 7th. So we've decided to help women exercise their rights with everything related to the war. But for us as a lobby organization and an advocacy organization, I'm sure you can relate, we knew that we have to talk to the field and to talk to the women themselves to understand what were the issues and the things that we should promote in the Knesset and in the government, because nobody's thinking about these women. So we had a couple of issues that nobody knew, and we were the one bringing to the Knesset table. For example, there was a situation when women who were pregnant and were drafted to reserve after they gave birth. It's not something that happens regularly, but October 7 was unregular to everyone. And these women, even though they were pregnant, were drafted on reserve voluntarily. They decided to do that, which is unbelievable. Kudos to them, seriously, really.
Yeah.
And then they gave birth and they found out that they're not eligible for childbirth allowances, which I know it's not the same in the States, but in Israel, it's a very, very basic right. And it's not a small amount. It's a big amount for a woman when she gives birth and she's out of the labor force. It's a big deal. So we received a phone call. We call it the Alice line. It's called after the late Alice Shalvi, who is our founder, and she passed away just before October 7 on Sukkot. So with the women calling us and understanding the situation, we were able to change the legislation and to give these women the allowances that they didn't receive. And that is just one small example of the idea of how we work. We talk to women, we understand what's happening in their homes, in the workforce, whatever they're experiencing, and we were able to bring these stories into policy and advocacy efforts.
Amazing. So I know how hard you've been working. We've been quite close over the last year, and I can see how much you're doing. And I also want to say a big thank you to you. And I also would like to ask you to speak to the following. I was thinking in preparing for this webinar how we talk about this expression, the fog of war. It's a famous expression. I think it was coined in the First World War. But I think one of the things that I've felt personally over the last couple of years is a kind of appreciation for that expression. This feeling that it's difficult to fully focus and that the war somehow sits on everything that is going on, like fog. But the reality is that we don't have the luxury of succumbing to this fog because things are happening, things are being advanced that we need to be alert to. So I wanted you to just speak briefly to this issue. What kinds of developments have been taking place at the level of policy and legislation that should be alarming to us from the perspective of women's rights and gender equity, because we need to also safeguard our society for the day after as well, right? So could you just speak to that, please?
Sure. I have so much to say. I hope I won't forget everything. But first of all, trying to promote policy in general, but to promote women's rights in the middle of a war is extremely difficult. It's even difficult to, we're an advocacy organization, so we work closely with the media. With the traditional media, with media outlets and so on. And we are a well-known organization, so it's not that hard for us to get an item or to raise awareness through these newspapers and so on. And during war, it's become very, very difficult to just raise issues around our needs and what we are promoting at IWN. So just talking about it and promoting things, and how it's all connected. So sometimes we, as an advocacy organization, will start something through the media and we want the Knesset to pick it up, or vice versa. And when they are also dealing with all the things that are happening during the war, which I'm not saying that are not important, of course they are, and we are affected by them as well. It's extremely important. It's extremely difficult to raise awareness and to promote policies that we are dealing with. I'll give you an example. One of the policies, the legislation bills that this government is promoting and this Knesset is promoting is gender segregation in academia. So until now, gender segregation was allowed in the bachelor degrees in the universities.
This is to accommodate, just to give context, this is to accommodate ultra-Orthodox communities that want this segregation in order to participate in the academic system.
That is what they say the bill is for. And as I said, because of an appeal to the High Supreme Court of Justice that was in 2019, already now in bachelor degrees, they could open specific programs to only men or only women students. But now they are trying to promote gender segregation in bachelor and masters and PhDs and everything that academia offers. And I don't know how much you've heard of the entire story behind gender segregation in Israel. It has been expanding dramatically everywhere. For the past 20 years, we see that we call it a slippery slope. It only started with a small, I don't know, in the swimming pool in your community, I don't know, place. So there was just, a few hours for men, a few hours for women. And we as women were told that we have to give them the opportunity to enjoy these things as well. And it doesn't matter if we get hurt. I mean, hurt as in we can't come to these events, or we have to sit in the back, or we can't come with our son, or we can't come with our partner. It doesn't matter, because it's small things that we have to let go for them to be part of society. And it started with these kinds of public events that are funded by the government. It then expanded to buses that are just for men, and women can't go on these buses, even though it's against the law. It still happens every day here in Israel. It also expanded to the defacement of women on billboards, which is a very big thing here in Israel. Even in Tel Aviv, it happens everywhere. It's not only in Haredi communities, it happens everywhere. And it's not just a mistake that they do it for everyone. We have posters of women and men together, and the woman gets defaced, and so on. It's a huge phenomenon here in Israel, and this government is trying to promote another gender segregation now today in academia, also in beaches. They're trying to promote the expansion. There already are segregated beaches here in Israel, also in Tel Aviv. They're trying to expand these beaches as well. And all of these are, small strides toward becoming a halakha country and making everything segregated. I wish it was a joke. I wish I was over dramatic, but being a government's relations, the head of the government relations at IWF formerly, before I became the CEO, I saw it firsthand how it happens in the Knesset, and I saw it now in the Knesset discussions. And that is just one small example.
Well, so I think this is, it's very powerful, and it certainly paints a picture that is quite alarming. And this takes me to the last question I wanted to ask you, and I'm aware that we're tight on time, so we're going to have to be punchy. But I just wanted to sort of say that you and I have been working quite closely together over the past year. through NCJW's Connecting for Impact program, which is the field building initiative that was established in 2018. We brought together leaders of feminist organizations in this very ambitious collaborative planning process, which resulted in the creation of several very significant cross-cutting strategic initiatives to advance gender equity in Israel. And you, Tal, have taken a lead role in one of these initiatives, the Policy Forum for Gender Equity. And I'd like it if you could just say a little bit about this forum and how you see it as a vehicle for positive change in relation to the kinds of challenges that you've shared today.
Sure. So yeah, this is something that we've been leading for the past, I think, more than a year. And I'm so proud to say that the forum has started to work, and we had our first meeting just a month ago. I think it all was brought up from the idea that we as a feminist field have to work together. It's not a luxury. It's a luxury for us to be isolated. In each organization, there are many feminist organizations in Israel. So we can't allow, with the specific climate that is happening now in Israel and the political situation, we can't allow ourselves to keep continuing to work alone. So that was the idea. And as an advocacy organization and as the head of an organization that has been leading and being part of the feminist organization field for the past 40 years, I saw this as part of the aims and targets of my organization. So working together with other feminist leaders and promoting policies together and fighting the backlash together is something that we have to do. And the surprising thing that happened is when we started ringing and we started talking to other feminist colleagues, they didn't even said something about, but why? What is the idea behind it? Why should we do it? Why should I take part of my time, which is very expensive, and come to this meeting, which is 4 hours a month? It's not a small amount of hours. And everyone were just, yeah, we'll do it. It's important for us enough to be part of it. And I thought that this is like the great answer to my question, if it's something that I'm only feeling or it's something that everyone else is feeling. So yeah, we are doing it with with many organizations, and I'm leading it with Keren Horowitz, which was the former executive director of the Hochman Center.
Right, Ruth colleague.
Right. And it's amazing opportunity because I'm considered to be a young executive director. I've been in this position for 1.5 years, and Keren has just left a position that she was in for a long time. So we feel the need for this forum to be also for new CEOs, but also the ones that are more experts. And I hope that we'll be able to have this forum as a sustainable group that will meet regularly and that will initiate projects and policy endeavors.
Well, thank you so much, Tal, and we're really grateful to be working in partnership with you and to have been able to sort of facilitate the creation of this through Connecting for Impact. And we really hope that it's going to be very impactful because, like you said, there is a lot of work to do. It's difficult times indeed. So
let me just add, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to add that I think that the need and the idea of it was something that I felt for a long time. And I think that the opportunity that Connecting of Impact gave to the feminist field, that you are kind of like a impartial player in the feminist field. And it's always, there are a lot of, which is completely understandable. Ego and funding situations, and it's not always so simple to collaborate. But being like having you in the middle of all of this I think was a huge engine for this success, hopefully, that we were able to collaborate. I think that if I would have done it alone, maybe it would have, made eyebrows rise and what Tal is taking out of this. And I think that the collaboration is the beginning of everything.
Well, thank you, Tal. Thank you for your partnership. I think, it's feelings mutual, and also with Ruth. And I just also really wanted to just have a little bit of time in the sort of the end of this discussion to look
Layla,
forward.
if you hear me, but I would like to add something to the question about the forthcoming situations, threats to women's rights. Just to add on, I think it's extremely important to talk about the religiosity, which is all-encompassing now in Israel, and to mention here the expansion of the rabbinical court's jurisdiction, which is the bill that is most advanced now, and it will almost obviously will pass and will result in actually establishing two systems of jurisdiction, two legal systems in Israel, where the rabbinical court's jurisdiction, by so-called consent, would expand to all civil areas, and not just marriage and divorce, not just family law, but to any regular commercial contract issues, to landlord issues, to employment issues. And this is really unfathomable, inconceivable. It's a situation which exists only in Muslim countries around the world, and definitely not in so-called liberal democracies. And it is an attempt that they had, and that the Rachman Center had been fighting against for 20 years now. It started in 2006. It's not new. But the present times, under the fog of the war and all the political constraints that Netanyahu is facing, it is now going to pass. And with respect to the academia, I think it's also very important to mention that men are allowed to teach in the male programs, but women teachers like me, I am unable to teach in those tracks which are for male students.
You mean men are allowed to teach women, but women are not allowed to teach
women are not allowed to teach.
So we're going to need to wrap up, and I did want to offer you a moment just before we're going to move to my wonderful friend Nancy in a moment, Nancy Kaufman. But I just wanted to offer you a chance, because things are so difficult and we're facing such an awful situation, and you're talking about the things that are going on under the fog of war, but we also want to end the war. We really want to end the war and bring the hostages home. And so I just wanted to ask if there's any word, and really there isn't much time for more than much of a word, really, just something a little bit hopeful. Do you have any optimism, any source of hope in this moment? Either of you want to speak to that for a second?
I think that one of the things that we had been feeling throughout these 2 years, the silver lining, if we can refer to that as in that sense, is the solidarity between women. And here I refer to solidarity among women in Israel, women as mothers. And I think that we are seeing it now more and more in the past few weeks, where hopefully there is a growing resistance, and the demonstration that you mentioned of 3 days ago had also been led by many, many women and by women's organizations. And women had been playing such a major part in civil society. Also during the judicial overhaul, Shikma, was the leader in the civil society organizations, and of course
Now
Gali,
it's a lot of mothers, mothers of hostages and mothers are very dominant.
the mothers of the hostages, right? But it's also solidarity within women's organizations in the Jewish world. And here again, NCJW and other organizations had been there for us right from the beginning. And it's very, very sad that it's under these circumstances of also growing anti-Semitism, and we realize how it is all connected. But we also realize that we are all connected and that we are also responsible for each other, and we are there for each other. So for me, I'm trying to draw some comfort from realizing this.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to, I think I'm actually going to leave it there. And Tal, or if you have one word to say that is a different kind of word, because I really do want to bring Nancy in, and I see that we're very tight on time. Do you have one final word, Tal, that you want to say?
I wanted to say that fighting the backlash of the anti-feminist movement is something that brings me a lot of hope, because we do have successes from fighting the backlash, but also that we are not, sadly, we're not alone in this field, and there are anti-feminist organizations around the world, in the States specifically, and we are so eager to learn from these fights elsewhere.
So a very similar message, and that's a perfect place, I think, to bring in Nancy Kaufman, dear friend, former CEO of NCJW, and you, Nancy, are going to be one of the chairs of our upcoming leadership journey to Israel in November. Nancy.
Thank you, Kalela. Thank you so much, Ruth and Tal, wonderful colleagues for quite some time. Let it be known that Alice Shalvey of blessed memory was our keynote speaker at what launched Connecting for Impact and our trip on International Women's Day in March of 2018. So I always hold Alice in my heart as the grandmother of the women's movement in Israel. So thank you both. Kalela, thank you. Just extraordinary work going on. It makes me so proud of NCJW every day. I think the work you have done quietly and effectively is just such a testimony to what it means to be building a field. And that was always the intention that we had when we started Connecting for Impact, and you've taken it to a whole new level. So thank you. So to everyone on the call, I want to say hello. Some of you remember me, some of you may not. But I want to go back to 2018 when some of you joined us on the last journey to Israel from NCJW. COVID intervened, wars intervened, and we're doing it again. And I just want to thank in absentia Sheila Katz, my colleague, for inviting me to co-chair this, Rachel Faulkner, who's organizing this, and of course, Kalela on the ground. We're doing a trip. I'm co-chairing it with Dana Gershon, former president of NCJW. We're going. We're going November 2nd to the 6th. I promise you, it's a little shorter than usual, but it's going to be incredibly powerful. And, we know that there's some concerns about going to Israel. I assure you, we will be safe. We will be secure. We will be meeting with women leaders all over Israel, and we'll be really taking a deep dive into what this whole Connecting for Impact is all about. It'll be substantive. It won't be your usual, but Federation mission to Israel. This will be a study tour. We're gonna parallel what's been going on the ground in Israel, and there's nothing like seeing it firsthand. We're going to work on understanding gender equity in Israel, and Tal and the work that her group is doing. That will be on day one. We'll obviously do a welcome. We start on Sunday. We're staying the whole time at the Tel Aviv Intercontinental, so you don't have to move your stuff. And then the second day, so we'll do it, understand gender equity. Then we're going to do looking at women's leadership and the influence at centers of decision making. That will be the next day on Wednesday, when we will go to Jerusalem and to the Knesset and meet with women leaders. And then we're going to go down south and talk about resilience and recovery through a gender lens. Some of us have been to Be'eri, some of us have been to Nachal Oz, some of us have been to Nova, but this will really be looking at it through a gender lens. This is, I think, a really wonderful opportunity to meet our partners in Israel. And then the final day, we'll talk about vision to action. So I just want to encourage people who haven't signed up to sign up. I think it's going to be an unbelievable opportunity. Any of you who've traveled with me know my passion for Israel. You know, I have friends in this world of the Jewish diaspora who said they won't go to Israel. And I said, well, that's like saying you won't stay in America. I mean, we don't support the government, the current government of Israel. We do not support what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank. But we do support feminist leaders in Israel, and it's the women who are going to get us out of this mess. I've said that for years. I'll continue to say it. That's our hope. That's my hope for the future, is that women are going to make the difference. So go be in touch with Rachel Faulkner, rfaulkner@ncjw.org. I think we're putting into the chat, Hannah, the link for the trip, the journey to Israel. Let's take a look at it. It's I've made my reservations. Sheila and I are going early. We're both delegates to the World Zionist Congress on the progressive slate so we'll be there the week before. And I'm very, very, very excited and very honored and humbled that NCJW has invited this recovering CEO to lead the trip. So I look forward to seeing you, Tal, and you, Ruth, and Israel, and Kalela. I can't wait to see you and Einat, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so just want to, all that remains is for me to say thank you to everyone for joining and for your support. And times are very hard indeed, but I really want to echo what Ruth and Tal and Nancy, what everyone's been saying, that it's only through being together and being a real, honest, genuine sisterhood that I think that we can forge a path forward. So thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.